Morning, everyone, and welcome to the European Policy Center. I see that we still have guests and participants coming in, so I hope there's still a few seats, I think, here and there. So please make yourself, yes, I see over there a few seats, make yourself comfortable. And with that, I'd like to welcome you to the European Policy Center for this event about investment in social and affordable housing. I think as we can see this morning, it's quite a topical topic to be concentrating on. So my name is Kuiper. I'm Associate Director at the European Policy Center, and I'm really pleased to see so many high-level speakers as well as participants for this event. And the fact that recent numbers illustrate how big the housing crisis is shows indeed how important it is that President von der Leyen, in her political guidelines for the 24-29 mandate, said that it's an urgency to tackle Europe's deepening housing crisis and rising inequalities. And probably indeed we all know the numbers. Over 10.6% of urban residents and some 6.2% of rural residents struggle with accessing housing costs, and more than 1.2 million people face homelessness. Yet, although we have seen that the topic also played a major role at member state level, as the recent 24 election showed in countries like Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, to name a few, the problem is not a recent problem. It is clear since a decade that public funds are far from sufficient to tackle the housing crisis. The 2018 Prodi report already illustrated this. This really reads as if it could have been written yesterday, I was just saying to a few stakeholders, but also Enrico Letta last year in his 24 report on the single market illustrated the need for private investment in initiative with a social focus. Addressing the housing crisis requires identifying tools and solutions to bridge the existing housing investment gap and mobilizing both public as well as private capital. In the current context, it's clear that due to fiscal constraints and new budget commitments in the area, for example, of defense and security, member states won't have the money and public spending is not going to be sufficient to address the current crisis. Today's event is building on the work that we have been doing in the past as the European Policy Center around 2019-2020 in the context of EU Invest. And for today's event, we have three objectives. I think the first objective is, and this really relates indeed to the first 100 days of the European Commission, where it's very important, of course, to see what can be done short term, so that also the new housing commissioner, in the context of the first 100 days and the first year of the current European Commission, can show what can be addressed at short notice. So we will be focusing on the potential of innovative financial instruments, best practices, national and regional initiatives, and also how stakeholders can work together and bridge that gap between the national and the EU level. For the mid and longer term, we're going to explore how social bonds, a social impact index, and a broader social taxonomy can play a role, and how indeed existing instruments can be streamlined to attract more private investment. Thirdly, the event is also an opportunity to offer an example of innovative financial instruments, such as the Social Impact Investment Index, which represents an important example in this space and can help developing the social infrastructure sector in Europe. With today's event, we really hope to kick off more work, building on the work that we've been doing in the past, on housing policy and investment. So I hope that many of you that are here today will also be involved in future events and roundtables where we go more in depth, and that will build on the outcomes of today's conversations and discussions. I'm very pleased to welcome high-level speakers and participants, starting with a keynote speech by DG Employment's Mario Nava. Mario, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I remember that last year, already months ago, we said how important it was to have you here. So I'm very glad that in your very busy agenda, you managed to come this morning. We also have two panel discussions moderated by myself and by our senior advisor, Lieve Fransen. And likewise, I think, Lieve, it was mid last year when we had lunch, which is a typical Brussels fashion to have productive ideas about the way forward. And where we said it would be important to have a follow-up of the housing project. And thanks to your drive and also great network, it's that we're here being today with a room that clearly is packed, because I see that more and more people are coming in. And we're also very pleased, and I think that relates indeed also to the importance of the European Commission coming up with an affordable housing plan and having a structure in place that's dealing with the issue from many different angles. So Matthew Baldwin, the chair of the Housing Task Force, it's also a pleasure to have you with us this morning. Likewise, for Mario, you must have a very busy agenda, and I think you are a much requested and demanded man these days, but it's great to have you for the second panel. So again, we're very happy to have you here. There will be time for input and questions and answers. So bear with us, because we're going to have two panels. We have a keynote, and we have indeed the presentation of the Social Infrastructure Impact Investment Index by PlusValue, which also is an important example. So keep in mind indeed what you want to bring up for further discussion. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Mario for your keynote speech. Thank you again, Mario, for being with us.
Actually, thank you very much, Dr. Kuiper, Elizabeth, to you. This is a pleasure to be here. The view of the room from here is fantastic. It's completely packed. There are people standing, so this must be interesting. And voila. So I think there are several reasons why I think it's good that we are here together to discuss this. Point number one is, I think, Elizabeth, you said it in your introduction, this is a huge problem that we are talking about today. In particular, I will focus on investment in social housing, and then Matthew will take the general issue of affordable housing, and I'm sure the two panels will go around. But this is an issue that cannot be solved by a single person. There is not a silver bullet. There is not a person or an institution then can do it. So doing what you're doing today, Elizabeth, and putting together different stakeholders is probably a conditio sine qua non for that to work, essential, but is also very, very timely. And I agree with you that one of the things that I want to learn more here is about the Social Infrastructure Impact Investment Index. And I know that Filippo is here and will be presented later. Now, what happens is clear. It's that across Europe, we are witnessing a very deepening housing crisis with severe social and economic consequences. And the challenges are both around affordable housing, but also social housing. They become pressing. Housing costs weigh heavily on EU's household, and about half of the household consider that they have housing costs that represent a financial burden. The availability of social housing is, of course, limited in many member states. The waiting lists are getting longer, forcing vulnerable groups into precarious living conditions. The reality is what we put already in the European Pillar of Social Rights, in the principle number 19. Housing is not just a market issue. At least we have difficulty in Europe, where we believe in the social market economy, to think that housing is only a market issue. Housing is also a fundamental social issue, in particular when there is lack for it. And in particular, people lack access to adequate housing, because that would increase social exclusion and poverty. Of course, the most extreme example of this is homelessness. And as you know, notably in the past decade, homelessness has increased across Europe. In countries, even in countries like France and Germany, it has more than doubled. You can be a liberal economist as much as you want, but it's difficult to understand / accept how it's possible that facing with other undoubted signs of economic progress and social progress, we have increase in homelessness. And at the same time, housing affordability, of course, has very broad economic consequences. If you have rising house prices and rents, it prevents young people to move out of their family homes. That may prevent them to enter the labor market, may prevent them to form a family, may have consequences on demography. So there is an whole sense of event that comes from housing. And this, of course, in terms, if you have less entry in the labor market, if you have less labor mobility, in terms affects economic competitiveness and social cohesion, both in the generation and across generation. So, Elizabeth, you are kind to mention the European Commission commitment, which it may have come a bit as a surprise to many of you. I'm sure many of you remember the exact word of President von der Leyen in July in the European Parliament when she said we will have a commissioner for housing. She said some words that to some of you may seem surprising. She said, if this is a problem of the Europeans, it's a problem of Europe. These were the exact words, which somehow challenge an ultra-orthodox implementation of Article 5. Because you may say, oh, no, there is Article 5, subsidiarity, and blah, 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 blah. Why should it be so? If it is a problem of the Europeans, it may be solved at the national level. Well, this may have been the case for a number of years, that may have been tackled at the national level, but as we see, not necessarily solved at the national level. And that's why, following up from that commitment and from the European Parliament endorsement of that commitment, Commissioner Jorgensen was appointed as the first ever commissioner for housing, for energy. We have had a few for energy, but for energy and for housing. And under his leadership, the task force led by Matthew has been launched. I will not say much about that because Matthew is here. But what I think is very important is that part of that work is, of course, the consultation process. And you said it, Elizabeth, in your introduction. Today is Seneca debut, and we start with that, and hopefully we'll continue. Now, investment in social housing is probably much more than putting money on the table. Putting money on the table, they don't want to provoke anybody, may even be the simplest of the questions, which doesn't mean that it's simple, but it's probably the simplest of all the questions that you need to address here. You need to ensure that mobilized private capital truly gets to that. And you need, in particular, to deal with something which is a failure of the supply. And that's typically is not exactly the easiest policy. We all know that, the easiest policy is to cope with the failure of demand. That's, economics 101, Keynesian intervention, and all of that. That is easy. A failure of supply is less easy. Having said that, is not unseen. We have done in the past a number of times, we have coped with the failure of supply. The Juncker plan was the reply of a failure of supply. The COVID, what we have done with the COVID and the vaccines, there was a phenomenal failure of supply of vaccine, and we have been able to cope with that. So not easy, but not unseen, and it has already been done. The trick in that, mentioned the Juncker plan not for nothing, because the trick in that is, of course, to bring together public investment and private investment. And to that effect, the Commission is working to establish a pan-European investment platform with the European Investment Bank to mobilize additional capital for the construction and the renovation, because we have the two issues. The caricature wants that in this part of Europe is more about construction, in the eastern part of Europe is more about renovation. The reality is a little bit more nuanced, but okay, it's both construction and renovation, and the idea is to mobilize additional capital, of course, with the help of national promotional banks, international financial institutions, and all of that. Once again, not easy, but we have some successful model. The first one is certainly InvestEU, the successor of the Juncker plan, is making a difference, is mobilizing investment for social infrastructure, including for affordable and social housing. We have, for example, the European Investment Bank has mobilized investment for 640 new social affordable housing units in the region of Hanover. And the Council of Europe Development Bank, that was with us in Milan at an event organized 3 months ago, has mobilized investment for about 1,600 new rental dwelling in Catalonia. But also the other example on which we can build off is something that we manage at DG Employment and of which we are very proud, which is the so-called social investment and skills window. And I apologize for the bureaucratic name, but it's exactly what it is. It's a window within the InvestEU, which is dealing with both social investment and skills, and which has some important national implementing partner, one of which is Martina, which is here, Cassa, Depositi and Prestiti, and in Italy, and which is working with a 50 million guarantee and working with something called Fondo Nazionale dell'Abitare, which should be an expected fund of about 200 million to do that. But also cohesion policy funds in general and recovery and resilience facility are mobilizing investment. Therefore, as I said, it's not easy. It's complex because when I see the different European funds, I admit they are relatively complicated. That's why we've put a toolkit in order for the people to navigate, but is feasible. Now, mobilizing private capital for social investment. Lieve Fransen, that was here in front of me and was mentioned by Elizabeth, she knows very well that when it comes to social investment, the challenge is not only about attracting money, but is making sure that the money you have attracted goes exactly where it needs to go. And despite the growth of social impact investment, the market still faces some barriers. Barrier number one is having clear, reliable data in order to invest. And barrier number two is, of course, ensuring that there is trust in the system. We all know that the investment comes from trust. For the Latinists in the room, credit comes from credere, and that is the root of trust. Now, the role of the social innovation call for proposal. As you know, we have made a social innovation call for proposal last year. The initiative was, I would say, successful. It plays obviously a critical role, and it was built around the idea of using a traditional grant scheme as a sort of seed capital. Once again, because of course you can not only do Keynesian policy, especially if you have to deal with a supply problem. What you need to do is to offer, supply some guarantee, and then make sure there are all the conditions for the private sector to come. So we have been providing resources for research and development in the field of impact measurement and management, and we have been linking part of the grant to the achievement of market-based results. Now, the response was positive or extremely positive. 8 projects were awarded with a total funding of 5.7 million, more than 200 organizations from 23 countries. And this initiative, of course, supports impact verification and transparency, better investment decision, and a stronger and more trusted social investment. Among the awarded projects, there is one of which we are particularly proud, which is the one mentioned by Elizabeth, which is to support the social infrastructure impact investment index, which is led by PlusValue, which is there. You will be hear about that later, but the initiative is very relevant to today's discussion because, once again, social housing requires trust, transparency, and above all, data-driven decision. Actually, in all the matters where you try to do some social impact, the data-driven issue is fundamental. It's the same, for example, in homelessness, in many, many other areas. The index, hopefully, will provide reliable and comparable data, will help benchmark and guide investors and policymakers, and will strengthen market transparency, ensuring that the capital is directed where is needed most. Let me conclude. The housing crisis, it's here. The housing crisis is a challenge. We may close the eye or open the eye and tackle it together. The Commission has obviously chosen the second option. We need a collective response. I was particularly happy when, for the first time, I met Commissioner Jorgensen and his head of staff to work with him for the preparation of the hearing. And what I was very happy was the response of the Parliament to the hearing. As you know, the Parliament has set up a special committee led by nothing less than Irene Tinagli, the former president of the Economic Committee. So that is clearly a demonstration of how important it is. So on the first point, the collective response, I think it is there. The second point, ensure that investment in social housing is backed by transparency, trust, and accountability. This is the project that we are trying to do with PlusValue, and hopefully that will be a major step forward. And if all of these work together, what we really hope is to strengthen social investment for the future. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mario, for a very, very interesting introduction. I'm also very happy to see so many people here and so many people from different angles. And I think that's what Mario said already. We need to work together. It's a collective effort. And while I was one of the co-authors of the Prodi report, the high-level report, or the high-level task force report, a few years ago, we predicted at that stage that it would have a political impact if we didn't act quickly. We didn't act quickly enough, and speed and scale are important. So that's only possible if we work together and try to move even faster and bigger. And I think the interest here, because there's a full room here, but there's also online, the same amount of people online. So that shows that there is a wide interest here. I'm not going to speak very long because I think Elizabeth already gave a very good introduction, and we have a very packed program. So I pushed also everybody to stay within time, and I will do the same. But I just want to remember that the high-level task force that I co-authored, in a way, the report that I co-authored, we identified at that stage 150 billion per year as a gap for social infrastructure investment. And the cumulative need was 1.5 trillion by 2030. We're not there at all, although several of you make a major effort. As Mario said, it's not only funds, of course. We are at that stage already. We said that we need to blend financing instruments so that we come to scale, and we need to bundle projects so that we have a scale and that the different financing instruments can work together. This is still a challenge also in the Commission, I believe, and for a lot of the parties. And we also highlighted the critical role of local parties. I'm happy to see here GDP and several other local partners from real estate. We will see, we will have the panel discussion in these areas, because the local actors know more and better and have a long experience how to deal with social and affordable housing and social infrastructure in general. So working together with them was one of the objectives also of in the Prodi report that we highlighted. Actually, it was spearheaded by LT, who is the European long-term investors. We also focused, this needs to be done long-term. It's going beyond political timelines in a way, and which is a challenge sometimes also. So the long-term investors, the local actors are important. Bringing in financing from private investors is critical. We will never have enough public funds to do the right thing in these areas. So we need to work together also and harness and crowd in private funds. And we need innovative tools, and they're innovative tools to facilitate and help standardize private and public investment in social infrastructure, starting with social and affordable housing. And that's where our first speakers come in here with presenting the index. The index, I want to congratulate the Commission and Mario, especially DG Employment, for having a very impressive, I was personally very impressed by the call for proposals, actually. Very rarely has the Commission done call proposals in that area in a way. So I was quite impressed. And then I was even more impressed when the PlusValue that I work with also won one of the awards. So we're now going to listen to where is Filippo? Yeah, Filippo, you are supposed to come here. Okay. Filippo is a co-founder and a managing partner of PlusValue, based in Milano and London. And Dimitrios Kolokas is the head of the research at PlusValue and at Research Center in IOBE in Greece. I think you will present your institutions and yourself. You're welcome to use this here, but I'm not going to go back and forth. So you hand over. Yes. Each of you has 10 minutes. You have slides. Yeah, you need to control the slides there. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Very happy to be here. Thank you with us. Yeah. So I have 10 minutes to present the work of years, started many years ago. I will do my best. Don't worry, we'll share all the materials. There are a few points, however, I want you to leave these days because they are very important points. So first of all, this has been a very long walk to SI4, and we are building this, first of all, on what the European high-level task force did, which was very important. First of all, identifying social infrastructure between us. This is a totally artificial construction that didn't exist. You speak to people and ask what a social infrastructure is, and they look at you like, oh, what's this? It's coming from Brussels, certainly. In reality, social infrastructure are like the dark matter of the social universe. It keeps together society. It makes it flourish. However, we're still not sure what is really it is, and certainly we don't have the tools to measure it. That doesn't mean it's not important. And this is what the task force did already years ago. And also they said, guys, these are kind of fundamentals for society. The public sector always funded them, but it's not the case anymore. So what shall we do? Social infrastructure are real assets that with an intrinsic social value that serves the needs of society, normally applied to housing, health, education. Actually, they are also looking into culture and sport. Let's say that it's an emerging category. What we know, and this is where we are here, we are facing historical social crisis. And the lack of investments and development of social infrastructure has a role to play. And housing in particular is the battleground because all the major trends are somehow conveying in housing. So we haven't chosen housing by chance. By the way, historically, if you look in this kind of watershed moments, governments repeatedly went back to housing because that's a way to give the first security for everybody. But what we also understood, and this comes from our research, they are real assets. It means they are investment opportunities. This is the angle if you want to mobilize the private sector, if you want to mobilize private investments. And actually there is capital available, interest. There are asset managers, there are some investment funds already happening, actually coming up in the last months. The European regulation has created the framework that we didn't have at the time of the task force, but the European regulation on sustainable finance somehow made the issue visible, relevant to everybody. It might change, inshallah, I don't care. They created the debate, investors understand it, now it's for us to exploit it. And finally, this is also new. Technological innovation, as in particular, big data, AI, have created the tools to address social impact measurement at the computable and scale as it was unconceivable before. Therefore, we are here. I won't go into details about the overview on social infrastructure. What I want just to say is clearly a priority and housing is the first priority amongst all of them. If you start looking at capital mobilization, and let me say there is not much information available, but there are interesting numbers, like for instance, one of the research of the long-term investment associations identifying 80 billion from the private sector only invested in social infrastructure, housing always being the first amongst the others, roughly 1/3. And Europe, certainly public and private investments on these assets is very important, but there is a gap, and it's a big gap. The task force at the time assessed as 440 billion annually. At the same time, there are substantial barriers in the market. Certainly, the real estate industry does not really understand what social impact is, besides a sort of compliance and nice to do, but is not part of the core value proposition. There is a nice essay to address this, saying that social impact is additionality. It's not the bottom line. And we need to address this. Furthermore, the European regulation has been, let's say, timid about the social impact dimension, such a much more timid complaint compared to the climate and the environmental. The Social Infrastructure Impact Investment Index is actually what we are developing and kicking off today. Our mission, because this is not just a product, the product is a tool to serve a mission. Our mission is to catalyze funding towards assets that bring value to society, drive a just transition, and offer long-term risk adjustments returns to investors. The last bit is the one relevant to mobilize private capital. It's a composite index that produces a quantitative assessment, of the social impact value and correlates to the commercial value. Quantitative and correlation to the commercial value is fundamental. Otherwise, it won't ever become a must to have. It will actually support the decision-making process in the investment in the full cycle and support all stakeholders in the investment process, public and private, asset owners and asset managers, lenders, project promoters, the social economy. In the future, it might actually become a tool for public transparency and accountability, but let's not go too far. This is SA4 is the product of a fantastic consortium. We have IFAD and IOBE here, Marco, Marta, Elias, Silvia. So this is an initiative that brings together partners with very different knowledge. IFAB on one side represent the Bologna Technopole, for it brings the state-of-the-art of technology, high-performance computing, AI tools. We cannot play this game without these guys. And they are excellent. And by the way, they are a real public-private partnership. And the public aspect in dealing with data, sensitive data related to people, is fundamental. IOBE, on the other hand, is a research institute which has decades and decades of experience in economic models on economic policy, industrial policies. They are one of the main assessors of what Director General Nava mentioned, InvestEU EFSI. So they have a deep knowledge of those public and private investment partnerships have done and what they should do. So state-of-the-art group, multidisciplinary to achieve a mission. I won't go too much in the details. We have Dr. Kolokas to present the methodology. What is important for all of you to get, these metrics actually comes from a complex environment. And this is not a simple game. Therefore, it's a research and innovation project at the same time. Metrics are based on regulation, reporting standards, best market practices, and the sexy part of this project, new proxies for social value. When I say that social value escapes the traditional tools, is not rhetorics, it's not marketing, it's true, it's really challenging to capture in a way that can really drive investments, public and private, as not a nice to have, but core driver. The metrics are applied and on real market data to produce a scoring which integrates social impact as an added value. This data, the real market data, is one of the very problematic aspects of this project because it's challenging to get them and bring them together. We'll see this at the end. Development pillars, what's very important for this audience, it has to be a data GDPR compliance. It has to be aligned with the EU regulation, but not just about that. And it will, at the end, create a software as a service delivered through a digital platform. So very easy to use by users. In brief, the project started well before the European grant, but the European grant kicking in on the 3rd of February, it's what has really made this SI4 to happen. The seed funding that, you know, all the entrepreneurs and new ventures need. We are in the first phase, working on the methodology on the data. We aim to have a first minimum viable product by Q3 of 2025. We tend to be optimistic. Sometimes we have to be realistic, and to have a beta version by the end of next year to roll out the project in 2027, end of 2026. Very ambitious schedules. Happy to tell you more in a couple of months. And finally, this project wouldn't be possible without development partners that share, give access to data, and work with us on the design and the test. And we try to bring together a variety and diversity. All the previous speakers stressed this point. This is a joint action. And so you will have Council of Europe Development Bank, Nordic Investment Bank, Bulgarian Development Bank, Invimit, and those are national promotional or multinational banks. As well as we have the Danish Social Housing Fund, Housing Europe, Conf Cooperative and Lega Coop representing social economy, as well as Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo and two private asset managers, Redo and Whitewood. You see the variety. Oh, sorry, I forgot the Institute for Corporate Governance, which has just joined, bringing the German real estate industry. This group is going to grow. And we are already in discussion with as many as those organizations, because without them, we won't be able to do it. Thank you very much. I thank you, the Commission. I thank you, the partners. I thank you, all the development partners. But this is a call for action, and there is a call for you as well. So come to speak to us afterwards. Thank you very much.
So hello, everyone. I just want to use this microphone, but I have to be standing as well. So I'm Dimitrios. Now it's the time that everybody was waiting. 45 minutes of strong econometrics, modeling, and methodology, right? No, I'm kidding. In the next few minutes, I will actually describe it very briefly, how we are going to approach and solve this challenge that, as Filippo, Lieve, and Nava mentioned, can only be achieved by collective effort. So, the methodology development, there are some five to six main steps. I put 5 because 5 is still the social impact measurement, and then the 6th is the ultimate goal. First of all, we would like to identify. Ah, sorry.
Or you move the thing, it has got wheels. So
Okay. What can I do? Okay. So, okay, fine.
So go back there.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry. It's the Mediterranean temperament. I'm sorry. So, first of all, we have to define the universe of social impact categories. What is social impact? How is it measured? How is it categorized? In order to do so, even if each of us have opinions, we have to rely on what is widely accepted by the market, by policymakers, and what has been the market familiar with. So we rely on regulations, sustainability reporting standards, certifications, best market practices, etc., in order to create the whole universe of social impact categories. Of course, this is an index for social infrastructures, but as we mentioned, we will tackle it sector by sector, starting from social and affordable housing. So the next thing to do is actually filter or focusing on the subset of social impact categories relevant per subsector. Because as you can understand, the social impact categories for social housing cannot be exactly the same as the ones of a healthcare facility. Then, after we have detected the social impact categories or issues, call them as you like, we need to find the appropriate metrics to capture this impact. Why is this important? Because as Filippo mentioned, this is a quantitative index. So we have to find the right metrics mapped against the right social impact categories for each subsector. The innovation, till here, you might think like, okay, so you just look in the metrics of regulations and certifications? No. Again, we have looked in the whole universe, environment of social impact categories, and we have mapped metrics that can capture the impact quantitatively. This is a complex exercise, and it's an extensive list that overcomes each and every framework or regulation in isolation. Fourth, after we have all of our quantitative data, the metrics, it's the statistical analysis that we will introduce advanced econometric techniques in order to base our estimations. Fifth step is actually this social impact index is going to be used by different users with different backgrounds and different needs. So we would like to offer the flexibility per different type of user in order to adapt and explore their social impact across also the value chain of social infrastructure investments. And last, which I think it's the most interesting part and what everybody is asking, so everybody jumps straight to the sixth point. So we would like, after having ensured a robust social impact measurement methodology, it will be a unique opportunity to associate and explore the nexus, the relationship between social impact performance and financial performance for social infrastructure investments to start from. But in order to conclude to the SI4 methodology, we had to screen the existing methodologies, and we screened them through a set of criteria met in the literature, because I'm a researcher after all, so we have to rely on objective criteria, including purposes, time frame, orientation, length of time frame, perspective, and approach. I will not go into depth for each and every of them, but what I can say, some users, some investors, they might be interested for the short term or for screening a project in the long term or for looking into the project level or at the macro level if they're policymakers. So there are different aspects to be followed. We build ASI4 in order to be able at least, so I would have added a phrase at least on top of it, to have prospective characteristics, so a prospective time frame, to look obviously for the impact, to be able to capture short-term, mid-term, and long-term impact, and to be used also at least starting from the screening phase purpose. But sorry, something happened. Okay, so what will the SI4 values are going to express? First of all, it's going to be based on quantitative statistical estimations that they will actually relate the investment characteristics to their social impact. So you will be able to identify and to have a quantitative value that relates investment characteristics such as financial volume of the investment or the size or the location with the social impact, not only the aggregated impact, but also per social impact category. Second, I think we think it's very important to look to conduct a before and after comparison, especially for metrics, especially for social impact categories that refer to affected communities. So how the introduction of a new social infrastructure investment affected the well-being of the affected communities. And last, it would have been naive to believe that social impact issues or investment characteristics can be observed in isolation. So it's fundamental for us to take into account interaction effects, that it might be either positive spillover effects or actually the one contradicting the other. So we have to take into account that this is not just research for research, but it's something that has to be tangible, not just for the investors or the policymakers, but most importantly for the society. And I will give an illustrative example because I think that's the best way for you in the next couple of minutes, Lieve, I think, to understand how it will look like. Assume that we have collected 200 social housing cases from France. The first step will be to collect the historical data related to the social housing investments. As I mentioned, type, location, size, investor types involved, developers, etc. So we collect historical data, completed investments for social housing. So we have this one set of data. Now, the second set of data that we will need to collect information for are the social impact metrics. For the social impact metrics, we will observe, as I said, it's a before and after approach we will follow, the social impact metrics before and after the introduction of a project, wherever this is for the social impact categories that make sense, of course. So we have collected the social impact data and the investment specific data. But what is our dependent variables? The dependent variables are the social impact metrics. This is what we care for. This is what we want to explain. This is what we want to measure. So on the left hand, we have the social impact metrics that we want to explain through the explanatory variables, which are the investment characteristics. An example of a dependent variable is, for example, the purchasing power after the introduction of a project increased by 5% for women within 5 years. This might be an example of an observation of our dependent variables. Then, of course, we run the econometrics that I will not bother you for that, not yet, at least. I have a surprise at the end. And on the next step, after we have run our advanced econometrics and our estimations, based on these estimated betas, relationships, coefficients, call it as you want, depending on your background, we will retrieve our score. But what is estimated beta? What is an estimated correlation or coefficient? An example, it's like per 100,000 euros invested in social housing, the crime rates improve by 1%. This is what we want to derive. Investment characteristics against social impact categories. Then we aggregate all these estimations, and we are ready to produce a scoring for a new investment to be screened or to be assessed. When I say new investment, it doesn't mean it has to be definitely the screening process. It might be measuring the social impact of a new existing or completed social infrastructure investment. And we are close to the end. As I mentioned, customization and adaptability to the needs of users is very important. So a policymaker or a government might prioritize for a specific community poverty above access to education. So next to the objective opinion or assessment of SI4 regarding the social impact, we will allow for internal purposes, internal decision making, users to assign the weights and prioritize the social impact categories based on their needs. We will also introduce the option for scenario analysis, like good, average, and bad scenarios. It wouldn't have been relevant some years ago, but with the political developments and the macroeconomic shocks that we have experienced in the last decades, I think it only makes sense to take this into account. An important feature that Filippo mentioned is that this is going to be an online tool. So we will dynamically update the database as new cases are coming in, as new macroeconomic information is coming in. IFAB is there to store the data safely, meeting the highest GDPR standards, in order to continuously updating and improving our estimation models through machine learning and the advanced econometric models. And last step, after, again, as I mentioned, the robust measurement of social impact, we will be able to observe the nexus, the relationship between financial value and social impact performance. So this is it from my end. I tried to be as fast and as elaborative as possible. What I would like to say, and it's a closing remark, I did not bother you now with details and technical details, but we will bother you soon you will receive an email with a link of our white paper explaining the methodology extensively. And we're looking forward not just for you to read it, but also to receive your feedback, because this is a kickoff event. This is actually to develop our methodology based on the needs and the feedback of people like you that you're here, and we have the honor to present our project to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Filippo, Dimitri. We have no time for further questions at this stage. It will come later on. And of course, this is a kickoff event, so we need to probably follow up with much more details. Go ahead. You're welcome to go and join the room. By the way, there's some chairs here still available because some people are standing there. Not for everybody, but there's one there, and we can take one more from the stage, I think. I want to introduce immediately the next speaker for the panel. We have two speakers in the next panel, but Martina Colombo, please, you join us on the stage, because I know you need to leave soon, so I'm very happy that you are there. Martina is the head of the European Affairs at the Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti, and a very prestigious and very old promotional bank in Italy already. I thought it was the oldest, but the French seem to be older, so interesting. Anyway, I'm not going to... Second oldest, yes. But you have a very long experience in social and affordable housing investment. And you can demonstrate also, you demonstrate with your experience the central role that national promotional banks can play in long-term investments. I think we asked you to talk a little bit about the challenges and the importance of social impact in measurements for investors. Second, to give some examples from your very wide experience. And then third, to make some policy recommendations for people that are here. You also have a paper that will come out soon, I think, okay? So maybe also we will feed all of these things in the website of the EPC and PlusValue. So the word is you, but I think you need to sit, you need to stand here, I think, or not? No, it's okay. Okay, you have slides. Yeah. Then you need this.
These slides. There you go. And you need this for the slides. Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you for the invitation. Very honored to be here. also representing the voice of other national promotional banks of Europe, belonging to the European Long-Term Investors Association, with Vitomir that will also intervene after me. CB is also part of LT. And just a word on the association, because especially on housing, we are really trying to make an effort to showcase how much we do already in Europe. First of all, to the Commission that has set up the task force to address the issue. And as we like to put it in the association, this is a European huge problem with national solutions that sometimes are already in place, already functioning, that can be certainly make more efficient and complemented by additional capital, private capital in particular, but we're not starting from zero. So there is a lot already in place. And I think by the end of, if not the end of this week, the next one, we will be presenting this brochure on the European Long-Term Investors website. Now, back to CDP and back to Italy. Italy is the Italian National Promotional Bank. We were founded in 1850, even before Italy existed in the first place. And we have historically been supporting social infrastructure. We are very similar to the French Caisse de Dépôt, because we also collect savings from the Italian people through postal savings, and we have historically invested them in social infrastructure at the beginning through public entities, so the regions, the provinces, the municipalities, all across Italy. Today, CDP is a much broader and bigger group. And in now getting into the social and affordable housing topic, we have established a model in response to the legal framework that Italy passed in 2008 to support what we call edilizia residenziale sociale, so social and affordable, then we can add housing. And this is what we have built then since. So next slide. We have what we call the 3S model. So we have started in 2008 addressing the issue of social housing for families with limited financing capacity to buy and or pay rent for their dwellings. We established a first fund of funds that we will then see how it works. And more recently, over the years, we have been addressing the wider need for housing, addressing also the needs of students, the needs of senior people, and what the last S that we add in the model is what we call the service housing. Service housing is addressing the needs of housing of young employees that start working in Milan, where the rent is completely unaffordable, not to mention buying a house in Milan, but also nurses and people that maybe have limited the capacity in paying the rent and or buying a dwelling. The main, let's say, common feature of this model is that we not only build and or revamp existing buildings, but we also provide services. So it's a combination of what we call the hardware intervention, with the restructuring of existing buildings or building new buildings, but complemented by services to this community that is established in each and every single intervention. And we have community managers that run this service. As I was mentioning before, CDP has set up a structure also now today through a dedicated asset management company, CDP Real Asset. And I like to describe this story as a PPP itself, because it's a partnership of CDP with our private shareholders. CDP is mainly controlled by the Ministry of Finance, but 18% of our capital is in the hands of Italian banking foundations. So philanthropic entities, I would say, that co-invest with us at the fund national structure, but then, and most importantly, co-invest with us in the various funds that we establish in each region of Italy, more or less. So you can imagine the national interest that is then pursued at local level, because in Milan, for example, Cariplo is co-financing with us. In Piemonte is Fondazione San Paolo that is co-investing with us. And this partnership attracts additional capital. So you see on the right-hand side of the slide, the 4 lines of business that CDP Real Assets is pursuing. We are today focusing on affordable social housing, but it's worth to mention that we pursue also an approach of urban regeneration. So in 2013, I think, we were, and basically we received, we bought assets from the state, old buildings that were abandoned. And what we try to do anytime we start a new social affordable housing project, we try to see if in our portfolio there are existing assets that we can refurbish, revamp in a urban regeneration approach. So as of today, CDP Real Assets in the affordable social housing space manages 3 funds. FIA was the first one. Today, FIA has nearly reached the full capacity in terms of project realized, nearly 255 different projects with, and you see the numbers up there, more than 12,000 dwellings realized and more than 12,000 beds realized. Out of the properties that we manage, 80 of them are directly owned by CDP Real Assets. They remain part of the total assets of the management company. And so typically the dwellings are given for rent. It's an affordable rent model agreed with the local municipality. And sometimes we can also offer dwellings for sale, but it says limited percentage between 5 and 10%. And it's also part of the agreement that we have with the local authority. In terms of what do we say, how do we define this rent affordable? Because we place the dwellings at a discount based on the local market cost of housing. Again, something that is agreed with the local authority. And typically we offer the dwellings at a discount of 30%. When they are placed for sale, they have to remain, say the owner has to retain the property for at least 5 years. So it's a way, to avoid also that, maybe a neighborhood that we revamp and we renovate is then exploited by real estate aggressive investors. So as I was mentioning before, we have this fund of fund structure, and more recently, one of our funds, I'm not sure that I described, no, the last one, Fondo Nazionale per l'Abitare, that was also mentioned by Mario, has been supported by InvestEU guarantee. Our model is actually self-sustainable, doesn't need, necessarily public money. But let's say the flip side of the coin is that the foundations accept a low yield, steady, but low yield return. Therefore, how can EU money support here? Well, 2 main issues that we have. In south of Italy, the cost of building and also revamping new buildings is the same as in the north of Italy. But in the north of Italy, people can afford to pay higher rents than in the south. So for example, contribution from EU money in our structure could help reduce the cost of construction. Alternatively, for example, leveraging on the EU guarantee, we could try to increase the returns and therefore attract more private capital at fund level. Back now to the question on the indicator, we do very much welcome SI proposition. One remark also, being aware of the many requests that we have when public money is involved, there are already metrics, for example, under InvestEU dedicated to the social investment and skills window. And it's very important that we do not add, requirements for implementing partners and investors in general. So it's very important that any new metric is developed in coherence with the requirements that we have from the European Commission. In terms of impact assessment, all of us, national promotional banks, being part of, for example, InvestEU, are required to assess ex ante and ex post the impact of our investments. And in our case, we have, as many of us do, an internal model that is making progress over time, also aligning the evaluation methodology to the ones that our stakeholders require. And also typically, for example, our internal model has developed over the years to incorporate the sustainability proofing that we have under InvestEU, to mention one example. And in terms of outputs, when it comes to this model, and this is in our let's say financial statements, we disclose the number of social housing projects that we bring forward. So in 2023, for example, CDP contributed to realizing more than 1,170 beds in social housing and more than 15,000 beds for students. Yeah. So we count the number of projects, we count the number of dwellings, the number of beds, and also we disclose the energy efficiency savings that we managed to achieve by, for example, building from scratch sophisticated, high-level standard new dwellings, but also when it comes to refurbishing, we try to improve the energy performance of the existing assets. In terms of recommendations, it's true, we have an LT paper that is in the making. The main message we would like to convey is that it's very important to leverage on what national promotional banks and other, let's say, national players have already been doing in the space of social affordable housing. And there are models that can be scaled. And there is a lot of complementarity also with what let's say the European institutions can do, thinking about what the European Investment Bank can do and European Investment Fund can do. In Italy, for example, we have a co-financing arrangement with the European Investment Fund, and the European Investment Fund has been investing with us in the student housing, for example, project. Whereas, for example, with the EIB group, we are trying to find co-financing opportunities when it comes to mixing the equity offer that we put on the table with loans that may complement the needs of each and every single social housing project. But again, it's a recipe that needs to be adjusted on a case-by-case basis based on, really looking into what is already there and can be further enhanced. Our model, we think, is scalable at a pan-European level because this European need of housing, we share it all among the national promotional banks, yes, and a similar structure where the national interests and they are then pursued by each national player can somehow scale up what we do in Italy, investing together at national level and then with each and every single stakeholder at the local level to address local needs. I don't have in this version a nice map that I would like to show you. I think we sent an updated version, but when we distribute the slides, we will make sure that you see what's been done. It's very impactful because FIA has invested basically in all the 20 regions of Italy. And looking at the city I am from, which is Milan, it's very, I always like to tell you more about this project that we have in the former Expo area, which is in the west part of the city. Milan basically lived sort of, the Expo brought a lot to the city. And what we did, we built a new neighborhood to support the construction of the Expo site, which is today a social affordable housing space for families, but also student and senior, because complementary to the housing project, we are financing with the EIB the construction of the new university campus of the University of Milan. So we, as you see, we try to combine, the offer and make sure that we do not create ghettos, but we create places for social inclusion. I stop here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Martina. Very interesting. I hope that we can connect even more with PlusValue and follow up on your comments and also on your data availability as much as possible. And your paper that you publish soon will also be very useful, I think, for Matthew and for the task force with the recommendations there. No time for now to go further into that, but and I know that you have to leave, but thanks a lot for that. But this is only the beginning of a further conversation. Thank you, and have a nice continuation of your day. And I have the next speaker, who is Sébastien Leclerc. He's replacing Valérie Vermandel for the moment, but you are the head of the fund management of Whitewood Real Estate. So you're based in Belgium and in the Netherlands, I believe, in your investments. So join us. You are very much, I understand you're a real estate company. You are deeply committed in the ESG principles, but you seem to have a problem, like many of us, to have the S filled in properly. There comes the work that the index is, people are doing, the team is doing there, may be useful for you. But anyway, I think it would be useful to hear a little bit more about your experience as a fund manager in social and affordable housing crisis, even in Belgium and the Netherlands, a serious political problem even, and the value of tools like the SI4 and the importance of public-private partnerships, because that's what you are focusing on too. Okay, you're welcome to join here or there.
There's a story. I have a story. The first story is the beautiful one. Please apologize my colleague Valérie. She's waiting for an happy event that's coming, so she cannot be there today with us. Whitewood Asset Management is a fund management company. It's an asset management company with roots in real assets, with a start in real estate, but we are trying to raise private funds to invest in funds that find solution to strategic problems in the society. But it has to be real assets. One of these are the social housing problematic that we know. We indeed are active in the Benelux, based in Antwerp at the beginning, now in Brussels, but I will tell you a little bit more about that later. Just like Mr. Nava said, the social housing, affordable housing is a real problem in Europe and in Belgium too. So we try to find some innovative financial product to raise private money to invest in that. But talking about raising private money, it's something that you often hear from the different problematic that we can have: defense, clinics, social housing, but also urban renovation. Just like we know, we are talking to private investors. Those private investors remain investors. Their objective are financial objectives. So they are asking for yield. They are asking for performances. But we have to show that besides the financial performances that they have, exists also non-financial performances that create value on the real assets. That's the point of Dimitrios, saying that the fact that when you invest, when you renovate a urban area, maybe that will lead to a decrease, I would say, no, an decrease in the discussion that we can have, criminal rate. What we have to show is that this decrease, this improvement of the situation leads to the fact that the people and the commercial value of the houses are going up thanks to this social impact. What we try to do on social housing at Whitewood, we have two types of projects. The first one, urban renovation, we'll talk about it later because it concerns this area here where we are standing today, but also social funds, investment funds in Belgium to renovate the social houses park. Renovate means the energy transition that we have to bring to the sustainability of those houses, to make the price of the energy bill more affordable, but also to match the ask and the demand. Today, when we look at the social houses park in Belgium, what we see is that we have the traditional 2-bedroom apartments. And today, just looking at Brussels, what we need is the half of 1-bedroom apartment for all the people that want to stay at home, and then houses with 4, 5 bedrooms for bigger families. So we have to match the two. So there is a huge need in renovation for energy transition and matching ask and demand. What we try to do is to raise private capital to do that, in order to do that. But we have to compose with the fact that the political decision, the decision of who is going to rent the social house at what price, must remain a public decision, must remain in the hands of the local, regional, national authorities. You maybe know Belgium. There were a lot of Italian speakers, which is nice today. Belgium is a true lasagna. As you look at the organization of the local, regional, federal, and community language, everything you can have. So you have a lot of stakeholders. So you have a lot of stakeholders to manage. And they want to keep the decision in their hand, because on a political and social point of view, it will be not acceptable that those type of decision, who is going to hire, who is going to rent, at what price, becomes a private decision, led by a financial institution like an asset manager. That's the first thing we have to do. Then we have to compose with the fact that we have to show to the investor that it will be profitable to invest in that. What are looking today, the private investor, are investment that has impacts on the E, the S, and the G dimensions of the universe. G, governance, being the Olympic minimum. Everybody's doing that. If you meet someday, somehow, an asset manager or financial institution saying to you, governance doesn't matter to me, I don't do that. That doesn't exist. Okay, so the G, Olympic minimum. The E, impact on the environment, is quite easy. Just renovate a house and it's done. Okay, the S is really complicated. We have the gut feeling that impacting the S dimensions will lead to better value, will lead to greater commercial values. But we can show that. We don't have metrics. We just have this gut feeling. And that's not sufficient for our investors, and also not sufficient for the regulators, because as an institutional financial institution, we are regulated. And we cannot say to the investor what our gut feelings are. We have to show data. That's the importance, I think, of this project from PlusValue discussion that we have. Really interesting to get those metrics. But again, we don't have philanthropists in front of us. So we have to show the impacts of this social data on the commercial value. And I will go further. And I will take the example of the European Brussels area district here. 1 year ago, Whitewood Asset Management, through a fund that we created, City Forward Fund, okay, bought 23 buildings here in this district, European district, 400,000 square meters. For people that are not often in the world of real estate, it's quite huge. It's not a building, it's an area, okay? And we decided to mix this area. There was 100% offices. We decided to create a mix, okay? We can do that because we don't build just one building, but 23 buildings. So we are not going to work vertically, we are going to work horizontally, and saying, okay, you won't have a building with three levels with apartments, 3 levels with services, and 3 offices. It doesn't work. We are going just to work vertically and said that building will become total social building with social houses building and also affordable houses. Okay, so we do that. We gathered almost 1 billion to do that, to build those buildings, to renovate the area. extra 1 billion to do that. So we have private investors. We also have the Belgian state, which is quite interesting in the fact to keep the European institution in Brussels, of course. But then we have to show two things. The fact that we create those social houses park will create value, already mentioned. But then we have to go a step further. And we need the help of PlusValue, to be honest. We have to show to the investors that the fact that we will bring 25% of houses and affordable houses and social houses in those 400,000 square meters will bring more value to the offices next to those houses. That this area will become more pleasant to live in, more pleasant to work in, and that as a renter, I will be okay to pay more to rent that building, that the price of the offices will also go up. That's what we have to show, what we try to do. But to do that, we need metrics. We believe in this story. We truly believe in this story, but we need metrics to show that to the investors. I think that's all. That's what we try to do as a totally private asset management firm. You have to know that it's quite difficult because as a pure private financial institution in the asset management industry, which is quite broad as industry, acting the illiquid assets, real assets, we are often categorized just as people that want to make money in London. Do you get me? So we have to show, we are not philanthropists, but we have to show that acting on the social impact create value. And that's what we try to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going indeed to extend the podium and get our chairs back. Can I invite the speakers for our next panel to the podium to join me here? I know that Matthew had to make a phone call, but I think he will be with us soon. So perhaps we leave this chair for him. So, Tatjana, does it work, the mic? Okay, thank you. There he is, Matthew Baldwin. So let me perhaps indeed already start introducing the speakers. And this is good timing to have indeed with us Matthew Baldwin, the chair. No problem, I think you're just in time when we were reorganizing the podium for 4 speakers to fit. The chair of the Commission's task force on housing. You're also the Deputy Director General of DG ENER in the European Commission. And I think you're very well placed indeed to say more about indeed what your task force is going to do. So it's great to have you with us. Then we have, and I think it's equally important, we have Bengt Madsen, the President of Housing Europe, which is very important because previous speakers have already alluded to the importance of local initiatives and regional initiatives. So Bengt, you are really well placed to indeed tell us more from your experience, both in Housing Europe as well as in Denmark, where you come from, indeed how that works, and then your take on the current situation. And then we have indeed Vitomir Raguz, you're representing the Council of Europe Development Bank. So we're equally happy to have you with us because you have been doing some interesting recent studies that indeed give us more insight on social investment. So many thanks also for coming from Paris to Brussels with us. Perhaps I start with you, Matthew, because your task force, and I say your task force because you're representing and you're heading the task force, has already been referenced many times. So perhaps indeed I start with a question. Can you tell us a little bit more? And I think there should be a mic. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit more about indeed the setup of the task force? Because already this morning, I think many different angles of the housing issue have been referenced. Of course, there's the investment angle, public and private investment, but there's the energy angle, the construction angle, there's the fiscal angle. So I believe that in your task force, you're indeed having a lot of commission services that are represented. So I would like to start by asking you, can you tell us a little bit more on how you're organized?
They have buttons. Okay. Organization is a big word when you're starting a task force, particularly in the European Commission. I will try to describe where we've got to. It is a thrilling, I use that word advisedly, task on which we're involved precisely for the reasons that have been so well set out already this morning. If I could just begin by addressing three conundrums. If Mario was still here, he would insist, oh, you are, conundra, probably, but conundrums I will use, which have been posed, which I think we're trying to address in the task force. One is the point raised by Elizabeth, by you, right at the start, that this is not a new issue. Housing has been with us a very long time. The housing problem has been with us a considerable amount of time. And in one meeting I had recently, somebody said, the problem you have is not to be the Messiah for the housing crisis. The problem with messiahs is, what do we do with messiahs? We wait for them. We don't act. We don't move forward with what is already ongoing. There are a number of existing work streams, extremely effective, which perhaps we can do better to bring together, which are ongoing. And the commission, the task force is not there to say, we are here, we are taking all of this over. The existing work streams, including in DG ENER on energy efficiency, in DG EMPL, all the great work you've led, Mara, and your team on social housing, on homelessness, the work that's going on in DG GROW, on the construction industry, please, please nurture, work with these guys, make them continue, and we are there to help coordinate and try to add some value. The second conundrum, I think, is that we have a short-term crisis and we have a long-term problem. So again, I think we shouldn't rush at this problem. We should, the Commission is not always the most modest institution. We don't like saying we don't know, but we will use this year primarily to listen, to learn, to analyze, and to come forward with proposals. I anticipate in the form of the Affordable Action Plan in the first quarter of next year. And not least because I'm delighted to see it, that the Parliament has, as you've already mentioned, has launched a special committee, and that will also be reporting in the context of this year. But we're not going to go dark. And again, back to those existing work streams, we hope that there will be, and this is very much the Commissioner's wish, that we'll see things emerge along the way in terms of policy deliverables. We are working very hard right now, for example, with DG Regio. I don't know if there's anyone here from Regio, on how we can double access to cohesion money for member states. We have been talking already about funding and finance. We have a lot of ongoing work also with the European Investment Bank and other financial partners to develop what we're calling grandly the Pan-European Investment Platform. And you can expect to see more news on that next week in Luxembourg at the EIB. And so we'll be looking to deliver things on the way. And then the third is what I will now, after that nice intervention from you, call the lasagna problem. The fact that we have essentially a member state, a local, a regional, a city competence. And I think, Mario, the quote you gave from our president at the start illustrates the issue very, very well, which is when there is a problem or a crisis that's affecting Europeans, Europe cannot afford to stand back. But Europe also, back to my Messiah point, is not going to come in and say, we're going to take over and solve all of these issues. So we are trying to define our mantra modestly as how we can support those ongoing responsibilities in a meaningful way and how we can add value at the European level. It is an exciting moment. We have the first ever housing commissioner who does not intend to be the last ever housing commissioner responsible for these issues. It's very interesting. It's twinned with energy. He sees very much his mission as delivering affordable and sustainable and decent housing in terms of, again, our support function. We will respect both the principle and the spirit of subsidiarity. I think that's extremely important. And we will work extremely closely with the Parliament, with the Committee of the Regions. Good to see you, other colleagues here from there, with the Economic and Social Committee, whom I'll meet this afternoon. The topics have already been, I think, well outlined. It's a supply and demand crunch with a very meaningful impact on real people. And the crunch, of course, is at the affordable and the social housing end. And I wish I could match Mario's eloquence on the centrality of homelessness. They are at the sharpest point of this spear, and we are determined to work, and Commissioner Jorgensen is determined to work with Executive Vice President Minsatu to support her work on this. The whole issues, and I was glad to see some colleagues here from the construction industry, all the issues around your competitiveness, your productivity, both in terms of construction of new buildings and renovation, looking at both the construction product side and the construction services side, all the issues relating to skills, which we will be addressing with Mario and his team in DG Employment and with DG Grow, and of course also leading across to DG EAC. The issues of speculation and financialization, those have been added to our task list too. We'll be looking at these in a measured and reflective way. And you're starting to see pockets of competence is a big word, but spin-offs, if you like, from our single market agenda relating to the short-term rental question, which of course is highly relevant and I think very big on the Parliament's agenda. Issues relating to state aids. Can we flexibilize our existing state aid roles? DG Comp are working very hard on that. And of course, last but not least, funding and investment in housing. So I'm coming to the organization. I've described the piece, which feels large. And again, where we can add value is the way to think about our approach to each of those things. We are delighted to have seconded colleagues from across the Commission, from DG Grow, from DG Employment, from the Joint Research Centre. I always embark on this list and I always forget one, from DG Regio, from DG ECFIN. I see Mikhail. How could I forget Mikhail? Great to see you. And last but not least, DG Grow. I think this reflects the team commission approach. And I know that my commissioner wants to work with other commissioners, with the chairman of the special committee, with all the other institutions, because that's the way we will add value most effectively. How will it look in practice, this year of consultation and outreach? Our plan is to have a launch event with the European Parliament. We're planning for that on the 24th of March. And yes, before you tell me, that is tomorrow. So we're frantically organizing to that point. And the idea will not be to solve the consultation in a half day of discussions hosted by the European Parliament. It will be to kick off a series of consultations and discussions theme by theme. The day after, on the 25th of March, DG Grow are holding their senior level industrial dialogue. That's extremely welcome. We will be looking with our Commission colleagues to focus on the different issues, the issues relating to cities sectorally. I see colleagues here from Eurocities. Where are you, Anna? There you are at the back. Please watch this space. Please work with us. We are going to be a friendly task force with a very thick skin and a very big ear. We'd like to hear from you. The point somebody made at the start, I think you made, about housing having the most visible, most tangible social impact as part of infrastructure. Let's use that to make a very meaningful consultation that touches the edges of Europe and not just the Brussels bubble. Help us achieve that. Thanks very much for inviting us today and looking forward to join your discussion.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I think your applause showed how welcome this message is. And I think it also links indeed to what, for example, the Committee of the Regions mentioned last week when they had a meeting where indeed there was, I think, a strong call on the task force and on the Commission to work with the relevant stakeholders. So I think this is well recognized as being very important. And I should say, because both you and Mario referred to the European Parliament Special Committee, Ms. Tignali sent her regards because she would have loved to be here, but unfortunately it's a Green Week and we all know what that means for the Parliament. But Lieve, Fransen, and myself are going to have a meeting with her in 2 weeks' time where we're going to inform her about today's event, and we're also working with her in the future. So I hope indeed that also she will be involved going forward. But Vitomir, let me perhaps now turn to you because in my brief introduction, I referred to the fact that the Council of Europe Development Bank has been doing some recent research, which I think is really interesting because it shows the gaps in priority social infrastructure segments. And I believe you had came up with country-specific recommendations for 9 countries. And I think given we have been referring so often this morning already to the importance of local initiatives and regional initiatives, could you say a few words indeed about that study and how that links to today's conversation?
Maybe I can step down if that's okay. Not because I'm
Either
a
here or
Mediterranean guy, but because I
Yes.
get the projection light into,
Yeah,
into my
I think
head.
you now stay within the range of the speakers online, so that's good.
Good. So basically, our recent research is focused on 6 priority social infrastructure gaps under the InvestEU program, something that was identified about 3 years ago, and I think DG Employment was the one who targeted these 6 segments of social infrastructure. So we have looked at 18 EU member states so far. We plan to do 9 more. Largest part of the funding comes from the InvestEU Advisory Hub. So basically, this morning, I'd like to focus on really on social housing. Because if you look at the colors that we have up here, basically, this is kind of labeled from our perspective. From investor perspective, development bank perspective, green means opportunities identified. So by looking at this slide, we really see what we heard from Mario Nava before and from others, that we have a social housing crisis. So we go country by country, and in every country, we have identified opportunities and needs. Opportunities in terms of projects that are in play right now, deals that are in play, but also medium-term and long-term needs. As you can see, there are only a few countries where the color is yellow, and in housing, there are no countries with color red. So we definitely have, let's say, market failure in the terms of InvestEU language in housing in Europe. But I think we all agree to this issue, and we can look at the numbers in different ways. But I think for CB, and I think perhaps for many of us, the most important outcome of this study is something that I would like to show you on the second slide. There we go. The problem for us, and I would say for lots of investors, especially private sector investors, is that in social infrastructure, the deal amounts are very, very small. So, you know, let's go to the extreme. For instance, look at Czechia. Basically, there are no projects that are valued 15 million euros or more. This is, I would say, some kind of a minimum for a development bank and for a private investor to get involved in terms of investment efficiencies. Even in bigger countries where we would expect bigger deals such as Germany, France, the number of bigger deals is very small. And here we have 15 million as kind of a target. But still, I would say for banks like EIB, this is a small deal amount. It's really cost inefficient for us. So, so basically, this is what, you know, came out and jumped out at us based on our research country by country. So basically, what we defined as an aggregator problem, for us to be an impact player in social housing, to really deliver the results that people may expect from us, we need to aggregate these small projects in some way. And so we discussed this the other day, and Lieve reminded me that this is really one of the main conclusions of the Prodi report. So that in social infrastructures, deals are very small, and we need to bundle them together somehow. So from now on, I would like to propose that we call this a Prodi dilemma in social infrastructure. From our perspective, from CB, and I'm sure from others, the objective would be, can we find a way to basically build aggregators? And maybe the European platform that Mr. Wallace is planning can play a role in some way. We have an idea of what the aggregators would look like. So maybe if perhaps now or later, I can describe the aggregators as well.
Thanks so much, Vitomir. And I indeed like the fact that you have pointed out it so clearly indeed that we now have the Prodi dilemma. I think that's certainly indeed a new term and a new narrative, perhaps, which is useful to keep using. Perhaps my first question before we go into discussion between us as well, now that you have the opportunity of sitting on the same podium with the Commission Task Force, what would be your main recommendation on the basis of this study to the European Commission's Task Force?
I was going to say I have three, but then I thought, no, I have more. The three is good enough. No, so I would say, number one issue is really this Prodi dilemma. We need to figure out a way how to build aggregators for social housing. And I think we can start with SPVs. And actually, this is something that the InvestEU Advisory Hub has already thought about. If national authorities, regional authorities, or municipal authorities are ready to pull together their housing needs, InvestEU Advisory Hub can provide the funding to set up the SPVs, including the legal documentation costs. This is one element, but I think again the funding here is limited. We at CEB were trying to do this with few municipalities in Slovakia and on a regional basis in Spain as well. So this is one type of aggregator. The second type of aggregator are really MPBIs, national promotional banks, especially in the smaller countries. For instance, we are working with ICF in Catalonia in Spain. They are a regional development bank, and they receive substantial funding for us really to build and finance small projects, very small projects that we could not do ourselves. It would be just too costly for us. The third type of aggregator could be a commercial bank or a cooperative bank. Cooperative banks do lots of housing finance, but sometimes these banks are really not eligible for loans from people like CEB. But the good thing is we have the InvestEU, and with the InvestEU, they can help us by providing certain guarantees to approach local commercial banks and local cooperative banks. So this would be, let's say, one key issue. The other issue, number two, is really the distinction between social and affordable housing. CEB is really a social housing bank. We serve the housing needs of what we call the first quartile of beneficiaries, people who really cannot afford, the poverty-stricken beneficiaries who cannot really enter the housing market. We talk a lot about affordable housing. This is what EIB wants to do, and we do that in part as well. But this is the second quartile of beneficiaries, people who really need extra, let's say, coin or a euro in their pocket to make them credit worthy. So we're really talking about two different types of housing. And we hope, we certainly support the affordable part. I think Cassa, Depositi, and Prestiti, they call this service housing. Policemen, nursing staff, educators who really cannot afford to live in metropolitan areas. So we hope to have a discussion how we can serve both segments, social housing in particular. Now, on social housing, we have a very current example of homeless housing. and DG Employment, maybe Mr. Nava mentioned it, is developing a platform to eradicate or to combat homelessness in Europe by 2030. So we're working with them. We're co-chairing the funding work stream. And so we have some basically lessons learned from this funding work stream. Municipalities, when they want to do projects like this, they really expect someone to come in with 20 to 60% subsidy for a number of reasons. And you know, the first step is really to get them going. Someone has to provide technical assistance to them, technical assistance to do the concepts, to do the designs. Our, let's say, EU municipalities, EU regions really do not have this expertise. And they do not have the budget. They do not have the, let's say, appreciation for the preparation of projects. We have recognized this as an issue in the neighborhood in the Western Balkans, and we have set up specific instruments, specific platforms to help them prepare projects. I think for housing, we need this as well. And of course, at the end of the cycle, we also need to help the municipalities integrate the poverty-stricken beneficiaries. So that would be number two. And number three, I'll make it very simple, housing standards. The housing standards have become very complicated, very demanding. About a month ago or 2 months ago, the Lobby Association of Housing Construction Companies in Brussels, FIEG, they put out a study which we thought was very helpful. And in so many words, they said that the requirements, the standards are really becoming cost ineffective. They're scaring away the investors, and this is something to take into account as well. So that's, I have more, but.
I think that's a long recommendation, Matthew. I think, please feel free to respond. Do you still have a mic? Yes.
I'll be really quick because I don't want to eat into Ben's time. But look, that was super helpful. I want 3 recommendations from everyone in this room before you. No. Look, on the financial side, as 2 words I take from that. One is aggregation, and the other is openness. And I really want to assure you that as we develop this pan-European investment platform, it must be open to everyone in the financial community, from the CEB, the EBRD, the NPBs, and I've really benefited greatly from the in-depth conversations I've had with the CDC and the CDP, and look forward to having them in CEP too. Second, the distinction between social and affordable housing. This is the parlor game of Brussels, and it's a very important discussion. I don't want to get too hung up on it, and I don't want to make this a great cleaving line. We are trying to deliver affordable housing, which must include and embrace the social side as well. It's a very important and difficult issue which DG Comp are looking with. And Tatiana, I didn't see you there earlier. It's Tatiana from our task force also joined from DG Comp, because you need to try to address that line in state aid rules. But let's make sure that this discussion doesn't bog us down. I am temperamentally capable to deal with more than one definition for different purposes, but I also know the EIB is looking at it.
Well, can I ask perhaps before you continue, because this was indeed an issue that I wanted to bring up, and indeed Vitomir and I also discussed it briefly yesterday. I know that the Commission has asked member states to come up with definitions. How have member states responded, and is this going to be possible at all?
Well, member states have, I think, grabbed onto this, particularly in the context of the discussion on state aids. And there's a group of member states that are really focusing hard on this. I mean, this is welcome. I mean, I don't think I can answer your question properly yet, because we're still doing our mapping and beginning our width of discussions with all the different member states, but it will be very important. But let's, again, not get bogged down and use this as an enabler to try to generate the maximum possible funding or financial support for these. I think we agree these are important quartiles to be addressing. Homelessness, you've addressed that, I think, extremely well. I would just say here, the city's role is going to be so important. Last week, the commissioner met with, I think, I'm looking at Anna here, I think it was an unprecedented delegation of big city mayors, I think 12 big city mayors, really underlining the seriousness of these issues, including homelessness that is facing them, and calling on us to really think of this in emergency terms as well. And I think with this kind of what I call helpful pressure, it will be very hard for us not to deliver. And lastly, on standards, I fully agree with you on the FIEC, the FIEC study. DG GROW are very much addressing these issues. And then back to the supply side of the conundrum, how we can use those as an enabler and not a disabler of what we're trying to achieve. So 4 very welcome recommendations, more required. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. And I indeed am keen to bring Bent in as well, because Bent, you come from Denmark, which I think is really interesting, especially in the current context, because the commissioner is from Denmark. So you know very well what he knows about the local, the national situation. And I know that you have prepared also your opening statement and a few slides that you're keen to show. So
yes,
you can either indeed show them from here or use the lectern as you prefer.
Yes, I think I can take this one. Yes, first of all, thank you very much for having this event and inviting us to this event. I have a lot of slides, but I think I will use 2 of them. First, a little bit about the Danish model, and then maybe it's invisible for many of us when we look at the social housing sector in Europe. A lot of the finance in the social housing sector in Europe is, in fact, right now private. So we are talking about blended finance. We have a lot of blended finance, but we also have, and I dare to say that, we have many members all over Europe. We have sustainable models, and we do have many not sustainable financing models. And we have to dare to look into also the not sustainable models. I know, Matthew, you also attended a board meeting, and we were very happy to have you in Housing Europe, to be very bold about what works and what doesn't work in the system, because I think it's not a good plan to try to put a lot of finance into systems which will not be self-sustainable in the longer run. We have to make new sustainable structures. I think that has to be the purpose of what we are doing here. But the Danish model, a little bit about, okay, comes here. Okay, a little bit about Denmark. We have one model and it's social and it's affordable housing into one model. So we do not have 2 models. It's the one and only model, and it's a model for housing for young people, under education, and challenged people. It's also under this umbrella. It's for ordinary, what you can call families, also challenged families, family homes, and it's for elderly people, and it's nursing home. It's exactly the same law. It's exactly the same financing system. And the financing system, it's in fact very clever, and I can say that because it's invented so many years ago. They've already dead, all of them who invented it, but it's very clever. It's a revolving fund. The basic thing is that you finance maybe a family home, you finance a family home, and when you finance it right now, you have 2%. It comes from the people moving in to the home, and when they move out again, they receive the 2% again. Okay, then you have 98% left. 10% of it is right now financed by the local municipality, and the local municipality have this loan. There is no interest on the loan, so it's in fact a subsidy. Maybe it should also be financed in the longer run by this fund I will tell you about. Previously, it was in fact, but it's a local municipality. What do they get? It's a system where everybody, all of you, if you move to Denmark, you can attend a waiting list. When you attend the waiting list, just in line, you get a home there. But when you count to 1, 2, 3, 4, every 4 vacant dwelling goes to the local municipality, and they can use it for social purposes. But if there is more social pressure on the market in the city of Copenhagen, they can say, okay, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 1, 2. And then the half of it goes not to the waiting list, it goes to the local municipality, and they can use it for social purposes. What the social purposes are is defined by the local municipality. And it's also the local municipality which decides how many almene boliger, as it's called in Denmark. It's not social housing, it's not affordable housing, it's It means housing for everybody, if you should translate it into English. And we have a mortgage system in Denmark. The loans which finance the social housing is also finance my home ownership. So it's the same mortgage loans we use all over the place. And when you have repaid your loans, you have the last installment and you pay that forever on in normal terms. You have repaid your loan, and this is the revolving fund. 1/3 goes to the local housing association, which is very restricted what they can use it for. 1/3 is going to a fund. What do we use that fund for? Actually, we try to eradicate homelessness and produce very cheap dwellings. In fact, we have allocated the money, but have they solved the problem? No, because it's not all about money. It's all about the social intervention. How do we do it? And 1/3 is going to two things. The one is refurbishment, renovations, also deep renovations, and maybe also tearing down buildings in the outskirts because people are moving into the bigger cities. It's accessibility, lifts. We get older and older in the societies, transforming the buildings to more elderly people and things like that. And modernization, insulation, taking homes from the 40s and lift them up to nowadays standards. And then we use it for social master plans in different areas. And there are 20% of the Danish population are living in almene boliger, in social affordable housing. And this is 20%, it's about 1 million. And in areas where 200,000 lives, we have these social master plans, and they are especially focused on children to make them, to get better through schools and education and things like that. And there we also use the PlusValue thinking because we created a impact council, and we're also very happy to participate in PlusValue to make impact investments. So this recycle fund, I think, what is the problem here in the Danish context? I'm the CEO, in fact, of this fund. In the longer run, it's a over-sustainable system because we are creating more and more money because we are recirculating them. At one point in time, I think we have to, nobody listens, I hope, to reduce the contributions to the funds. So the problem is not scarcity of capital. In fact, in the longer run, it's that we have too much to the building mass. So it's the Danish case in a nutshell. Can we use it as an experience? Yes, OECD Economic Department has in fact done it for the last 5 years. We have a close collaboration with the OECD. And we try to, OECD, make us export the system, and we have done it a couple of places. This one, it's, of course, you have to change this a little bit when you do it, and you can say, okay, you have 30 years, and you have this loan, you can start it here, and you get the revolving fund in 30 years. But how did we start it in Denmark, and how do you start a thing like this? You take the existing building mass, and then you say, okay, we have a little tax on every square meter. It's a typical way to do it. And this little tax create the first money, is the first seed in the revolving fund. So you can from day one create this revolving fund. In the longer run, this seed capital is very little because many money are pouring into the fund right now. But in the beginning, the many years, it was in fact the fund. So it's the basic thing in the Danish model. And when you look at the European, the funding of new housing projects in many countries, you can see the yellow color is private loans. So we are in fact using a lot of private loans in many of the different systems in Europe already. So we have this kind of blended finance. And I think you should, or we should be aware of that and say, what is it? Where can we take more inspiration from it? I think that would be my initial words.
Thank you so much, Bent, for sharing the Danish experience. And I think, while Matthew still has his notebook and his call for recommendations open, I think indeed my question to you is as well, on the basis of what you just presented to us, what is your main recommendation as President of Housing Europe to the Commission Task Force?
Don't do it.
Yes, what I said to begin with was that we have to look at the systems and be very honest to ourselves and say some of the systems we look at in Europe, they are in fact not sustainable. And I know that there is a little distance there, but we have to make good recommendations from the European Commission, but go a little bit step further, because the problem is that if we use money from the EIB or money from the funding from the Commission to put into a not sustainable system, I think we're not done our job properly. So I think we have to make conditionalities when we use the money. Say, okay, we have the money, but if you have access, you should have access to the money. You also have to make some structural changes at the local level, and then be very aware of that when we are talking about why the Danish system is cheap, is in fact the non-profit, because when you look at the subsidies from the government, it's in fact often negative in the system because of technicalities. So the system, so it's a non-profit system. It's the basic thing, but it's based on private capital. And why do we get it so cheap? Because we have guarantees, and we do never ever use bankruptcies because of the fund, because the fund is the safety net. And every time there is a problem, I decide to bail out, because if I do not bail out, then I have higher price on all the loans in the whole sector.
Could I ask a question? Because it is a very interesting model. I've learned that much so far in my short time in this job. Could you talk about the problems you faced in applying that model? I think you said to 2 other member states. And what was it? Was it the particular national or regional specificities? I mean, if you don't want to name the names, but I would be very interested to learn about that.
I think you have to be aware of, when you look, I can take the Danish case, 50, 60 years ago, who was the opponents to the system? Many of the housing associations, because what did we do? We actually took money out of the housing association and put into the pot and used them collectively. So as I would say, the main opponents was ourselves. So we had a big battle there. But if we didn't have that these years, many 60 years ago, I don't think we would exist today. So sometimes we have to take these rather bold decisions.
Another question that came to my mind, and I think it's something that I think the 3 of you in different ways touched on. When I think you speak about conditionalities in order to keep systems sustainable, or indeed to avoid that low-income tenants are footing the bill. I think especially when it comes to the involvement of the EU and ensuring indeed that we're using instruments that are fit for purpose. And again, that we avoid that with introducing conditionalities, we're keeping the system flexible enough also to adapt at local level. So how do we do that? Because it's true that I think in town, I think there's an equal level of excitement about the fact that housing is now being dealt with at the EU level. But I think there's perhaps an equal level of some worry that people say, well, actually, we have good examples like the one in Denmark you just illustrated. So if we're now sort of giving the message that from now onwards, we're going to coordinate everything at EU level, that's not a message either. So what is the level of sort of balance that we're looking for?
Two hugely important words: best practices. And this is why I'm interested in your examples and the examples of the work that the CEB has learned about. I would be very surprised if all of our collective work launches a big agenda of regulation, harmonization, of all those things. We can do so much more and so much more quickly if we can properly distill and disseminate best practices, whether it's on funding and financing models, learning from different regional and national specificities. I think that's probably a way we can go further and faster, and we can adjust to the fact that we have 27 or 30 or 35 different housing markets across Europe. We've got to find solutions that work for all. On the conditionality question, I'm instinctively exactly where you are, which is you want to keep the system flexible, but we've also heard how you need to keep the money in the system. And you know, the revolving fund nature of what the Danish system offers, I think, is to me instinctively an important part of the conditionality in terms of how funding and finance should be distributed. But that's the first reaction.
Either of you want to come in as well?
Sure. On this issue of common standards, and I really think you made a very good point. I don't think we need to wait for Jesus. I think we have very good examples state by state. We heard about the Danish model. We often hear about the Austrian model. We often hear about the Dutch model as well. So the member states have their own ideas what social and affordable housing should look like, and that's okay. So we should not really insist on standardization, coalition of standards, taxonomy. I don't think this is needed. And from a, let's say, private perspective, I think it's even better if the states compete. And states can learn from each other. And today, I think this idea of taxonomies really comes from the digital age when everything should be in one wallet, everything should be in one app. I don't think this is how we kind of thought about things in the past. And, you know, I think competition is a very important element of our existence, and I think it should be in housing as well. So we have worked in housing for at least 6 decades, and we have always worked with different models in different states, and it's fine. And you know, we look at the new member states now, you know, they're getting older, of course, but some of them are basically looking at these 3 models and trying to copy. And what they're finding is, you know, for them, they're not necessarily affordable, and that's okay. They can do what they can do, and we should work with them as Slovakia or as Poland, not necessarily as Denmark, but Denmark is a great model, and maybe they'll get to that point at some point, but not immediately.
Another question that came to my mind, because clearly we're also indeed talking about what instruments that already exist can be used in the current context. And I think a few times already the state aid rules were referred to, but I also was thinking, also building on, I think PlusValue is very clear call for more data. It made me think of the annual growth survey, where I think over the years, increasingly housing has been included as well as a topic where more indicators are needed. And I know, Ben, that Housing Europe, I think, has tabled a few really helpful position papers on this, because I think the question is, are these the right indicators, and are they helpful in the context of EU work going forward?
No.
It's a very clear answer.
Yeah, because when we compare the different countries, the quality and the number of data are so different. In my own little country, I have data for everything. I can I know where people live. I know what they pay in rent on a daily basis. I know their children. I know their grades in school. I know their diseases. I know if they've been to the dentist. I know where they work. So I can combine.
Scary.
Yes, it's scary. But I cannot take you, Matthew, if you lived in Denmark and say, okay, this is Matthew, because we have to respect that on the individual level, but it is on the personal security number. We have all these data and we can combine them, and it's very good also because when we have these impact investments, because we can do it very easily. We can see how long are you from the labor market. I have your approach. Do you receive what kind of benefit do you receive, and you can combine it with yes, your parents and things like that for the last 30 years. that I can do in the Danish context. I can't do it in the Swedish context because they are a little more discretion in Sweden. We can't go so close to people, and in other European countries we don't have it. So improvement of the data is so important.
I am aware of the fact that the audience has been waiting for quite some time to come in. So perhaps indeed, because I see indeed that I think all of you are keen to comment, but perhaps indeed let's bring the audience in. And I know that my colleagues will come with the mic. And indeed on the front row, we already have a colleague. And perhaps very briefly, if you can state your name and affiliation, that would be very helpful for us.
Will do. My name is Robin Verleijen. I work for ADIS, which is the Dutch Association of Social Housing Providers. And I wanted to comment on your sheet, which was very interesting about the aggregation of projects and the low level of certain projects and deals. I think you make a very good point. I think aggregation is a very important element, also through national promotional banks. You also pointed out the Dutch model. I think it applies to some of our members. Some of our members, they make smaller deals, and aggregation is quite important. Some of them make extremely large deals. While you were talking, I looked at, we have a similar guarantee fund as Bent has. And last year, the guarantee fund guaranteed 90 billion of outstanding loans. So sometimes the volumes can be quite big as well. So I think my comment, I had to ask a question, but it is a comment, would be don't rule out direct investments either. I think it's both. You have to do aggregation when it's possible, when it's needed actually, but when it's possible, direct investment can help as well. That would be only my thing. Yeah.
Just to say before we go on, because Lieve reminded me, if you have any questions directed to PlusValue, because we didn't have time for questions, and of course, feel free to also ask them, because now is also the time to address the questions regarding the index.
Hi, thank you for the presentations. I'm Ioana Vlad from FEANSA, the Federation of Organizations Working with the Homeless, and happy to hear that homelessness has been such a central issue. However, I am wondering how more concretely we can follow this in the projects that we give as good examples. And I'm thinking here, I'm sorry that the representative from Cassa, Depositi and Prestiti is no longer here, because if we think of their financing as an example in Italy, we can also ask ourselves how much of the housing produced is for what income category, and how much is the lowest income or the most vulnerable and the homeless people represented in the production of social housing, and the way they define it, and the way they cater to it through their financial model. So I think this is an important problem, whether the financial model that is proposed is taking into account needs assessment, like to what extent does it respond to existing needs, for instance, as defined by social housing waiting lists. If we think of Milan, I think there was some study that found that about 3%, I think, something like that, very, very small, of the social rental housing produced by the private development, the private institutions, is like canone sociale, like the very social, the most social type of housing, and the rest of it was like whatever defined with the municipality, but catering to higher income groups. So I think we have to take this into account, the different quota that responds to the different existing needs, with prioritizing the most vulnerable, of course. Thanks.
Thank you for that question. So the need for needs assessment by FEANSA. I don't know if there's, because I think it was more a comment, but do you want to react on that, or?
Just really quickly, I mean, I really enjoyed meeting FEANSA. Need to learn a lot more. Clearly, whatever financial models, plural, I think, which we develop together, needs absolutely to address that. I think that's axiomatic. But at the same time, we also, I think it's, and this is the balancing act we have to deliver. I think there is a push to address what the CDP called the services part, the fourth S, which is the nurses and the social care providers and the teachers who so often can't afford to live where they work. Getting that balance right not just in the European part, but across Europe, I think will be a really important part of the puzzle. Can I just quickly say a word about the data thing that was raised? It is so important. We have at the same time both not enough good, clear indicators for how we're going to address this puzzle, and we are wading in data. Michael Tekabau, our chief economist of the Housing Task Force team, will be working on this issue, helping us try to dig down and define the key performance indicators that we'll be using, and he's going to need all of your help. So thank you very much in advance.
Thanks for that comment. So another question, yes, over there.
Good morning, I'm Roxana Della from E3G. Thank you very much for this great panel. This is a very much needed conversation. I have two questions. One is to Matthew Baldwin, because you've mentioned that you will be also looking into financialization and issues of speculation. And I understand that there is plans to work on short-term rentals regulation, but aside from that particular file, like how do you plan to work on financialization? And then another question is that the mandate is to deliver affordable, decent, and sustainable homes. I haven't heard much about sustainability. There's been a few comments made about improving the energy efficiency of buildings, renovations. All of this is great. I imagine that there's going to be also a lot of new housing that will be built. In a research that we've conducted, including in Denmark and Poland, we've seen that in Denmark, actually, the social housing sector seems to be the one that is at the forefront of building sustainable homes, actually. So just to say that there needs not to be a dichotomy between social, affordable, and sustainable. However, I haven't heard much about it. There's been this comment made on standards. I haven't read the FIC report yet. I'm a bit worried. We know that by 2028, there is a requirement for all new buildings to be zero emissions. So I just wanted to bring this up and see if it's at all being considered, and what perhaps what would the task force need, or what are the main questions perhaps the task force has in mind for the delivery of affordable and sustainable homes. Thank you very much.
We can take a few questions because indeed I think time is also running out. So I see indeed a question there in the back, and then I think we go perhaps.
Hear me? Hello, thank you very much for this event. My name is Ulrike, I'm from EKD. I've actually got two questions or remarks. First, actually going to PlusValue about the social impact indicators. You mentioned that you are basing the analysis mostly on housing, health, and education. I just would like to point out that in my opinion, or that, this is not entirely covering all social infrastructure. So, I mean, those are the areas in social infrastructure which are the most or the easiest to measure, I think, or to valorize. But social infrastructure, in my opinion, should cover any infrastructure that responds to a social or common good or need, and that contributes to social cohesion. That also includes, for example, meeting places for people in rural areas, in a city, to make people meet to combat loneliness, to care for people with disabilities, to care for people with addictions, for example. I mean, like all of that is basically infrastructure that is needed for social impact as well. So I think I would just ask you to also take this into consideration, because those are, I think, impacts that are even harder to valorize. And the second question that I actually have is, what is the role of cohesion policy in funding housing? Because we've been talking a lot about financial instruments, but to me the question is also, what about the just classic grants and cohesion policies, which I think is just as much needed as well. And if I'm not mistaken, in general, this is possible to be funded on the ERDF at the moment. So what about that in the future? Will there still be a possibility to also simply include investments in social housing in the ERDF? Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for these questions. So indeed, we have first the question about sustainability. I think that's a very good point. And Matthew, probably with your ENER background, I think you're very well placed to answer that one. A question to PlusValue, and I think indeed you captured that question. And then a question about the cohesion funds. And that probably also links to another question that I had, which is that the Committee of the Region last week called to use also the future multi-annual financial framework And we all know that behind the scenes, the preparations are already starting, and we will see more of it this year. So I think that's a question about the use of the funds, which is an interesting one as well.
Just the things quickly.
Great, yes.
Pass on to others. Great questions and comments. Thank you very much indeed for those. Yeah, on the financialization and speculation part, I think this it's clearly been added to the mission letter of Commissioner Jorgensen, interestingly, in early December. It's an issue which came up very clearly in the hearings. It's a very lively political topic. Again, we will address this in analyzing this with colleagues. I'm sure there'll be hearings on this point. Maybe the Parliament will hold hearings, others will discuss it. And we need to get the ideas on the table. I've heard very strong arguments on both sides of the debate. One contrary argument, which I found interesting, was the big institutional investment tends to come from pension funds at the moment, who are looking for a steady rate of return. They're not moving their investments in and out of the sector. But in other areas, there may be issues where speculation has played a role. The whole financialization thing, my home being an asset class, is clearly something that bothers people. And we need to look into it, and we need to address it. You mentioned short-term rentals. Really quickly on that, of course, there is a new regulation which comes into force in May of next year, and it actually goes to the data point. It's starting with saying, if you're a platform, Airbnb, you need to be providing data to the municipalities, and I think that will be a very important first step as we decide if we need to go further with the short-term regulation to address this difficult balance that a lot of cities are struggling with between the need to attract tourists and at the same time to protect their longer term residents. On the energy efficiency side, it's really important to remember that my colleagues in Directorate B of DG ENER will continue their work. They're the guys who so brilliantly worked with the member states and Parliament to produce the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which now needs to be implemented. That work goes on. And of course, they also report to Commissioner Jorgensen's, why he's calling for the affordable and sustainable. You won't hear me talking much about those issues on panels, but of course they come together. And like you, I see no fundamental, at least long-term dichotomy between affordable and sustainable and decent. We've got to make sure that that's the case. The role of cohesion, how much time do I have left? It's been massive. And of course, through the ERDF, the different funding streams, it has been important. It will continue to be very important. That's why, as part of the mission letters, both Executive Vice President Fitu and Commissioner Jorgensen have at their mission letter to double the amount of cohesion money, which serious numbers from around 7.5 billion to around 15 billion. Of course, that's the beginning of the story, not the end of the story. The member states got to take that up. So we need a strong push from this community, from housing ministers, to say, right, this should be a new priority. And that's kind of my answer too on the MFF. The fastest way to a short career in the Commission right now is to speculate about what should be in the next MFF. But if you all want to see housing as a priority under whichever structures the MFF comes out, you all going to have to say that. Thank you.
That's a clear call for action again. We're going to finish with PlusValue. I think you have the last word. So I need So Bengt and Vitomir, if you have anything to add as sort of a close remark, perhaps also capturing the previous questions, feel free. You have let's say a minute for that.
At the end, 30 seconds. It's because the green sustainability and social sustainability is very important, and I think you have to distinguish between new buildings and renovations, because in new buildings it's an issue, but when I look into renovations, it's a very big issue, and sometimes we have a subsidy of almost 100% from the fund just to lift it up to the green standards. So it's one of the biggest issues. And then about the social infrastructure. Right now we are investing in a Danish context in local buildings and local clinics because we have to increase the proximity in health. In all our data, we can see the frequency of the diseases among the million living in the social housing sector in Denmark is the double, and I think it's that all over Europe. We have so we have to a lot more proximity in healthcare to the people, but because we have this majority of diseases, and when people get older and older, you will have this more pronounced in these areas.
Is there anything that you would like to add? I think you gave your recommendations. They are well noted. Thank you for that. So indeed, Filippo, please feel free to come in.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for asking, because you're perfectly right. Social infrastructure is not just about housing, health, and education. But as you said, they are the easiest. And if you want, at the moment, the very crucial one is think about housing. So ours was just a pragmatic choice, and to focus on the most relevant, easiest to define in order to show the value, some concrete progress, and then to move with all the other social infrastructure. Some of them are actually very difficult to define. But what we want to prove is that social infrastructure are that potential of being measured in their intrinsic social value, and that intrinsic social value is fundamental for any investment. Let me add another point, because this has been a fantastic discussion, but there is an elephant in the room in my way, at least from all the research we have been doing and the engagement, we are always scale. Guys, this is a big scale game. So I give you a couple of numbers so you understand what I mean. London, yes, they Brexited, but still very relevant city, and one of the most relevant to the housing market. In London, you have what is called temporary housing, so not homelessness, but temporary housing. So people, families who are entitled to a house, but there is no house, and so they end up living in an hotel or Airbnb. Great for the family. Imagine 65,000 families in London, one of the richest places in the world. 65,000. Do you know, now there is a discussion, a program to develop this. Do you know what it means in terms of investment? 18 billion. You know how much London is the government is ready to put? 1 billion. With matching that. So this is when we start talking about issues.
The London authorities are getting 1 billion.
Yeah. Sorry, we can go into the details of these models, but those are concrete, real case studies. And to build that number of 65,000 houses for the families and eradicate temporary accommodation in London, roughly 10 years. Milan, you ask about Milan. So Milan as a state-owned, publicly owned housing units, roughly 100,000, 10%, 10,000 are not usable. And the city council does not have the money, and the region has not the money to refurbishment and to make accessible. But that 10,000 would make a difference in the Milan market and finally building real affordability in Milan. The city council can do two things: make those assets available and facilitate permissions, planning permissions to accelerate the process. And the money, where do they come from? Here we are talking in a multi-billion funding program. So, but if we don't think in these terms, we'll never address housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Filippo. Indeed, on that note, we're approaching the end, and I think you summarized and illustrated once more what we've been trying to discuss this morning, namely, indeed, how important private investment is in social and affordable housing. And I think all the speakers in their different ways and also addressing different angles have illustrated that. I believe, indeed, there was a lot for you, Matthew, and for the European Commission, also represented by Mario Nava, to listen to. I think clearly there was also a call to yourself in the room and also online, because online we also had 180 participants. So please be in touch, because this clearly for us as the European Policy Center is the start of a project where we're really keen to work and continue working with all of you. So please do be in touch. If you're not subscribed yet to the EPC's newsletter, go to our website, epc.eu, and inscribe so that you get the news and that you get also more information about next steps in this project. So with that, I really would like to thank all our speakers. Really, it was incredible to hear your insights. So many thanks to all of you. I would like to thank Lieve as well, because I said at Lieve, I think it started with a conversation, and I'm very happy to see that it translated to a very concrete event and hopefully a project. I would like to thank my colleague Gemma Dervisi, because Gemma, you have been instrumental as well when it comes to putting this together and supporting me and the team, and also my colleagues of the events and operations team. You got numerous slide decks, but I'm very happy indeed that at the end we got the right ones on the screen. So many thanks to all of you, and I hope to stay in touch. Thank you.